I need justice for everyone I lost along the way.
I want to start by just saying I am personally fascinated and in love with these stories that combine something about history and legend and fact. And you seem to continue to find them and explore them. And I want to ask, what about that particular thing, and Billy the Kid is a perfect example of it, fascinates you? And how do you navigate the interplay between what we know and what we don't?
Okay, well, the first thing is in this instance, it was a bit different from other things that I've done because Billy the Kid was a hero of mine when I was a kid. Even though I grew up in the north of England, which is about as far from New Mexico as you can possibly get. But when I was 7 or 8 or whatever, I used to run to school across the landscape, and wasn't a schoolboy. I was riding a white horse, and I was Billy the Kid. So Billy was really one of my first heroes, and I wrote little stories about him. I began my writing career about that time, and a lot of my stories were about Billy. So when Michael Wright of MGM Plus a few years ago now said, I want to write, I want to do something with you, Michael. What do you want to do? And I said, oh, I've always wanted to do a Western. He said, okay, and what would you do? I said, well, Billy the Kid. And one of the reasons is I'd be fascinated to know, because I'd have to do a lot of research and so on. I'd be fascinated to know whether he's worth my hero worship or not. Or is he just another pathological killer, like most outlaws are always portrayed as? So, so that was the sort of beginning. And I'm pleased to say that my hero worship was not embarrassing, was appropriate. Billy was a fascinating young man. Came over as an immigrant with his parents, who were forced to go west into a very lawless, very awful situation, and he lost his parents early. He had a kinship he had sympathy, great sympathy for the Mexicans, because they were outsiders and trodden down, and as an Irishman, he identified with them. He loved them. He fell in love with a Mexican girl. He was great at dancing and singing. Who knew that he had Billy the Kid had a great voice. And of course, I always look for ways of connecting the historical figures I'm writing about to today, or to situations today, or events or things that are happening today. So the big one really was immigration. This is a story of immigration, in a sense. And, Billy responded really badly to the sight of Mexicans being forced off their own land. The Americans were cleansing New Mexico of Mexicans, in whatever way they could. It was very unjust. And Billy ended up really as a fighter against injustice as best he could. And, I admire him. I admire him for that. And also in a way, he always really wanted to go straight, but he couldn't help it. It was the way that things happened to him, and losing his parents and falling in with the wrong people. But um, he, to me, he's a kind of heroic figure. You know,
I
I
think
love him.
Yeah, I'm curious to know when you fell in love with him when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Happened to me too. There was a book I had, there's a movie sometime. What was the thing that you saw or read that made you fascinated by him?
Oh, all the bad things, like the fact he was a great killer, the fact that he was the fastest draw, in New Mexico, and the stories that are told about him, I mean, he escaped from every jail that he was ever put in, and obviously you've heard, because if you've watched the show, you've seen that thing when he was confronted by a guy who wanted to kill him and had a gun, and Billy just said, "Could I look at that gun?" and quietly took out two of the bullets. And this guy was still aiming his gun at Billy, and Billy said, who didn't, well, didn't have a gun in his hand, and Billy kept saying, "I don't want to kill you." And this guy was holding a gun. It's that I love those stories. So my social conscience came a bit later, frankly.
Right, right. No, I mean, look, there's people like Jesse James, right? And and
Yeah,
and and if you have a social conscience, Jesse James is trickier, or Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp.
yeah,
Like all these
yeah.
guys are complex. And
Mm,
what you do with someone like Billy and Jesse Evans, there's these things that you kind of threads you pick up and then things you infer. Some of these escapes are true, the crazy ones,
yeah,
really. And then there's
yeah.
other things in here that you might have to guess. And I'm curious, particularly when it comes to how you handle his ending, which is shrouded in some doubt in the real world. Why you choose the things? Why did you choose this ending for Billy? I guess that's the question.
Well, you don't know what the ending is
No, I
yet.
don't. I don't. I know some. Look, I know how it relates to what we know in history.
Right.
Yes.
So, and I don't want to talk about it too much, except to say you might find it slightly unexpected, but
Yes.
still plausible. I mean, I always like to think that if I depart at all from the historical record, or if there is no historical record, but I have to write a scene about someone, I always ask my historical advisor, if I write something like that, I say to him, first thing, does it seem plausible to you? And if he says yes, that's enough for me. And then I say, and does it seem truthful? And if you can say that to both those things, then I'm happy and I put it in. So Billy, of course, most of this final season is very emotional, very sad. Some of Billy's best friends, some of my best friends, like because I was writing about this, get killed, obviously, in terrible, terrible situations. And I've humanized that as much as I can. It's like, just imagine it's you.
Hmm.
It's you, you've had this fantasy about riding with Billy the Kid, which a lot of people did, and they joined his gang and they died in horrible circumstances. And they were young people. So it's a very, very emotional story, and it stays emotional to the end, especially, I would say, between Billy and Jesse. Billy and Jesse had, when I started writing, I had no idea that they would become so central
Hmm.
to the story. And they are they're both great actors. I've had such fun with them. And the fact that they couldn't kill each other was more to do with them than me. I mean, not the actors, but the characters. It was like the characters couldn't kill each other. It was like, no, no, we're not doing this. And I couldn't do it. So watch for the ending of that relationship, how that pans out, because it's the most powerful, the most emotional of everything that happens in the end.
That's beautifully said. I love that the character started to lead in the dance a little bit.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions that are kind of like updates on projects of curiosity. What there's this long gestating 1906 project you've been attached to with Brad Bird. That's the San Francisco earthquake. Recently, it was said might become a series. Do you have anything to do with that, or any updates on what's happening with that?
No, it's a long way in my past.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, and okay, another project.
And I tell you, actually, it was very interesting that. Do you know why San Francisco was saved in the sense that it wasn't totally burned down? It was
No.
saved by ordinary people going out of their houses, finding some water because the things the things didn't work in on the walkways. Um, so it wasn't the authorities that put out the flames. It was ordinary people. They bulldozed some of the houses to create things. They lived and died doing that, and they stopped the fire. And I wrote about that, and I was pleased. And I thought, my God, Americans are going to be really interested in it. The studios had no interest in that at all because it wasn't heroes
Hmm.
who saved the day. It was ordinary people. And I said, but you're an American. You're supposed to like ordinary people, you know? No, no, no. We want heroes, Michael. It's heroes who saved the city, you know. So in a sense, I walked away from that, you know.
I admire that. I admire your reasoning and your sticking to itness. That I didn't know that either. That's fascinating.
Yeah, no.
I'm curious about how Bloodaxe, which is coming up, ties to your Vikings series because there's lineage connections and there's timeline connections. But in your words, where are the overlaps and the tie-ins
Well,
there?
it's a totally different series. It's 100 years after Vikings. It's a totally different world because this is the end of the Viking period, more or less. Bloodaxe is one of the last great Viking leaders who believes in the old ways and the old gods, and his adventures are quite extraordinary. Um, he became king of Norway. Then he became king of the Orkneys. He went and ruled York. He went and ruled Ireland. And he had a beautiful and wonderful magical wife called Gunhild. So their adventures are at the core of this.
And this stuff's true. I want to make clear that that's again, you're
All
back to
true.
this thing of this. A lot of this is true. Yeah.
It's all true. There's very little I ever write that is not true in inverted commas. It is the result of research, and even the most blatantly strange things usually are true in one sense or another. Because I enjoy that more. I like to, I feel more comfortable writing about things. I think, well, that's true. In fact, all of Billy's escapes are true.
That's the crazy.
And it's just that some of them are absurd. Some of them you can't believe he did that, but he did, he did it.
That's the
Yeah.
craziest part, right? It's some of the
Yeah.
innocuous stuff that's not true, but the crazy stuff's all true.
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, one of the other thing that drew me to this period, this because I'd never thought I'd do another Viking show, but it's the characters. I mean, there are incredible characters in this show. So, and my favorite one is a guy called Egil Skallagrimsson. And Egil Skallagrimsson was a huge guy whose family was expelled from Norway because they killed a few people, and they were exiled to Iceland, and all their properties were confiscated, and they wanted revenge. Now, Egil was a killer. A huge guy. He had a deformed head. He had that Paget's disease where you get these bony spurs. So he was 6'6" with a huge bony head. He was a pathological killer, uh, but he was also, and more importantly, the greatest poet that that Scandinavia ever produced. He is called one of the founding fathers of Iceland. He was a great hit with women all around Scandinavia. He used to recite his poetry in the great halls, and women would flock to him. And so, what's not to like? I mean, you get a character like that, and you've got to write about him, because he's not believable, and yet. Hey guys, he's true.
You couldn't have sold me any better on this, and I wish I had way more time to ask you questions about all of this and find out what you're going to do next. I'm excited for the show. Thank you for Billy the Kid, and thank you for your attention to detail and history. I love all of it. Um,
Okay. Well,
thanks
thanks. I've
everybody.
had a good time.